On this video, I would on this video I would like to conclude Elihu's speech to Job. This is in chapter 37. Elihu concludes his speech by speaking of God's sovereign voice, as it were, in nature. His voice is heard in the storm, in the lightning and thunder, in the snow and rain, and in the cold and ice. Job is to hearken to this voice since he cannot comprehend God's working in nature. One of the things I think scholars have said, how does Elihu fit in to the narrative of Job? I think we are learning that Elihu's focus is upon God's discipline to bring learning and understanding through what he's going through to Job. I also think it's interesting that this last speech prepares the way for God's speech in 38, which is about nature and so forth as we move on and when the Lord speaks. So as we pick this up then in verses 1 to 13, God's greatness is heard and seen in nature. And so we begin, Af lezot yecharad lebi. Indeed, to this my heart trembles. Yecharad is a cow imperfect third masculine singular from charad, to tremble. Veyitar mimekomo, and is moved from its place. Yitar is from the root natar, to move, and here we have a cow imperfect third masculine singular from the pei nun verb natar. The nun, by the way, of that pei nun verb has assimilated progressively into the tav. Yin tar becomes yit tar with the doubling, the dogish in the tav. So as we look at verse 1 then, Elihu hears the thunderings of God's storm, and he trembles. He is afraid. And so in verse 2 and 3, we continue. Shem'u shamoa berogez kolo, vehege mipiv yetse. Hear with attention, or hear attentively unto the noise or the rumbling of his voice, and the sound from his mouth goes out. Shem'u is the cow imperative masculine plural from shama, and shamoa is your cow infinitive absolute. So hear with attention, hear attentively, we could say, at the rumbling, roges, at the rumbling of his voice. No doubt looking at the storm, the thunder, and so forth. Vehega mipiv yetse, and the sound that goes forth from his mouth. Yetse is from the root yatsa, historically a pei vav root. The vav has elided, and we have compensatory lengthening with the hirik going to its seri under the yod. And so it's a cow imperfect third masculine singular from yatsa. So the sound that goes forth from his mouth. Tachat kol hashemayim yeshrehu, ve'oro al kavfot ha'aretz. As we look at this, instead of all the heavens, he lets loose, or I should say, under all the heavens, he lets loose, and his lightning unto the ends of the earth. So under all the heaven, Yish, under all the heavens, Yishrehu is from the root to let loose. Shara, so he lets loose, or he lets loose from the heavens. All the heavens he lets loose, and his lightning, the oro al kanfot. I should have said it's a noon there. My eye failed me a bit there. Al kanfot ha'aretz, and his lightning unto the ends or the corners of the earth. And so as we look at verses 2 and 3, the Lord is, or Elihu is saying, listen up, Job. Elihu asked Job to listen attentively to the noise of God's voice and the growing or the growling thunder issuing forth from God's mouth. It goes forth under all the heaven, and his lightning flashes throughout the earth unto all the corners of the earth. And so we continue in verse 4. Acharav yishav kol, and after it his voice roars. Yishak is from sha'ak, cow imperfect third masculine singular, from the root sha'ag, to roar. So after it his voice roars. Yar'em bekol ge'ono, he thunders with the voice of his majesty. Yar'em is from the root ra'am, to thunder. It's a Hiphil imperfect third masculine singular from ra'am with the a seri vowel pattern here. So he is caused to thunder with the voice of his majesty. Below ya'akavim ki yishama kolo. He does not stay them or restrain them when his voice is heard. In other words, he doesn't hold it back. He doesn't heal it, so to speak, or hold back. Akavim is from akav. It's a PL imperfect, a third masculine singular, followed by the pronominal suffix third masculine plural in the aim. So, and I would just understand this to mean he does not put the heel in and stop. Hence, he does not restrain them when his voice is heard. Yishama is from Shama. It's a nifal imperfect third masculine singular from Shama. Notice the IA vowel pattern, the doubling of the sheen, and the noon of the nifal has assimilated into the sheen. Yin Shama becomes Yishama Kolo. So as we look at verse 4 then, in the storm, the thunderclap follows the lightning flash. And when he thunders, he continues to bring forth the lightning. So in verse 5, the result he will give as to what goes on then with this storm. Yarem el bekolo niflaot. He thunders, or God thunders with a voice, like with a voice with marvelous things, or things that are marvelous. Niflaot here is a nifal participle, feminine plural, from pala, to be marvelous. So he thunders again. Yar'aim is from ra'am, to thunder, a hifil imperfect, third masculine singular again, from ra'am with the A-E vowel pattern. He thunders, or God thunders, with a voice of marvelous, of wonders, so to speak, of that which is wonders. Nifal, as we said, participle feminine plural, from pala. Oseh gedolot velo neda, doing great things which we do not know or comprehend. Oseh is the cow participle masculine singular from asa, doing great things, velo neda, and we do not know or comprehend. Neda is the cow imperfect, first common plural from yada. So we do not comprehend. Again, a pay vav verb, and the vav has elided, and we have compensatory lengthening from ahiri to etc. under the noon, the first person plural here. So we do not comprehend the great things that he is doing. The result of observing the storm is to see that God thunders marvelously with his voice and does great things which men cannot fully comprehend, is the point that he is making. So then we move on to verse 6. V'tavo haya b'mo arev. Then the beast, the wild beast, goes into hiding, or into coverts, to hide. Tavo is from bo. It's a cow imperfect, third feminine singular from bo. So the wild beast goes in hiding, or in coverts where he can be hidden. And u vim ono totecha tishkon, and dwells in their dens. Bimonotecha would mean in its dens. Uh, Notice the bait here, the bet here, or the bait is inseparable preposition in. Meonot te is the plural, meaning dens, in construct with ha, your pronominal suffix, third feminine singular. And remain, or tishkon, dwell in its dens. Tishkon is from shakan. It's the cow imperfect, third feminine singular from shakan. So what he's saying here basically is animals also seek shelter from the storms. During the winter months, many hibernate, having no need to forage for food over the desolate earth. And so we continue then in verse 9. Min ha-cheder tavo sufa. Out of the chamber comes the storm. Notice here, tavo is the cow imperfect, third feminine singular from bo. So from the chamber, God's chamber, comes the storm, and mizarim kara. And from, we could say, scatterings, speaking of the storm that God sends, from scatterings, the cold, kara. And the thought here in verse 9 is, from the chamber. room. Where God stored his winds would come the storm and the scatterings. And this could also look at the north from where the storms would come, would bring the icy winds, the scattering, so to speak, which would scatter and blow across the land. And we continue then in verse 10. Menishmat el yeten kara. By the breath or from the breath of God, notice the two nouns in construct, nishmat or construct, nishmat el. From the breath of God, he gives ice. Yatain is from natan, another peinun verb, cow imperfect, third masculine singular, where the noon has assimilated into the tav here, yintain becoming yitain. So he gives ice, virohav mayim bemutsak, and the breath of the waters is in constraint. In other words, is constrained, or probably the idea here in verse 10 is God's breath would bring forth the ice, which would constrain or freeze the waters. So now we move on to verses 11 and 13 as Elihu continues talking about God in the storm. And so we pick up in verse 12 and we continue then. Vehu mesibot mit hafek betach bulotav. And he or it is turned around or turned back and forth or turned around in his guidance, takbulotav. And the participle mit hapeg is a hitpael participle masculine singular from hafak, to turn around. So it is turned around from his guidance. Lefa ulam ko asher yetzavim, to that they might to do all which he commands. Lefa ulam is from pa'al, to do. It's a hifil, it's an infinitive construct with the pronominal suffix third masculine plural in the to do all which yetzavim, he has commanded them. From sava, to command, it's a PL imperfect third masculine singular followed by the pronominal suffix third masculine plural. Upon al panei tevel aratzah, upon the face of the habitable earth or world. And so basically he is talking again about God's storm, lightning, and what he's accomplishing. And we continue. Let me just finish verse 13 then, and we'll summarize verses 11 to 13. Im leshevet im le'arso. Whether it be for the rod, literally, for correction, I think is the idea, or for his earth, im lechesed, or for mercy, yamsiehu, that he causes it to come forth. Interesting here, shevet means rod. It's probably looking at correction. Would be an idea that probably Elihu is bringing out, or the author of Job, quoting Elihu, or for mercy that he caused it to come forth. Yamsi-ehu is from matzah, to come forth. It's a hifil imperfect, third masculine singular, followed by the pronominal suffix hu, third masculine singular. So as we look at verses 11 to 13, the lightning and the thundercloud, reasons Elihu, comes from the guiding hand of God. It is not haphazard in its movements. In light of this, the storms may punish or bless, depending upon the people's relationship with God. If they are humble before Him, He will have mercy upon them. If they turn away from Him, He will punish them, having that kind of that duality effect. So in verses 14 to 24 now, having set forth God's movements in nature, Elihu now calls upon Job to learn the lesson God wants to teach through these phenomena. So he wants Job to pick up the lesson that these things are teaching. So in verse 14, we then continue. Ha'azina zot, Job. Hearken unto this, Job. Ha'azina is from azan, to hear or hearken. It's a hifil imperative from azan. So hearken, masculine singular. Hearken unto this, Job. Amod v'hit bonain niflaot el. And stand still. Amod is the cow imperative masculine singular from amad. Stand still and give consideration or consider. Hit bonain is from being, to understand. It's a hit polel. Perfect, third masculine singular from being, to understand. And so understand and consider, or stand and consider, or understand the wondrous works, niflaot, from pala, another nifal participle, feminine plural here, the wondrous works of God. And so what Elihu is simply saying, he's beckoning Job to stand still and give ear to the wondrous works of God seen in nature that he has been describing. So in verse 15, it continues then. Hateda b'shum Eloah aleihim. Do you not know in how God is enjoining, how God concerning them, how he places lessons concerning them, I think is the idea. Ha is your interrogative pronoun, and teda is the cow imperfect second masculine singular from yada. Again, another pei vav verb where the vav has elided. We have compensatory lengthening under the prefix, the tav here, from ahirik to etc. So, do you not know bishum Eloah aleihim? Bishum is a cow infinitive construct. How God places or concerning them in order to teach and instruct. Behofia or anano, that is, and how he causes to shine. Hophia, lightning, or lightning of his cloud to shine forth. Hophia is from the root Yaphah, again, a Hiphil, perfect, third masculine singular from Yaphah. Historically, it was a pei vav verb as well here. Vafia becoming how, Fia becoming Hophia. We were looking at it sort of the way it developed historically. So causes to shine the light of his cloud. And what Elihu's asking is, do you know how the light comes out of the dark thunder cloud, Job? Elihu asked Job. The question, then, along with those in verses 16 to 18, is rhetorical, anticipating and expecting a negative answer. And it reminds me again of God's speeches to Job, sort of like almost an introduction to what would follow, it seems to me. So, verse 16, then, we continue. Ha teda al miflasei av. Do you know concerning the balancing of the clouds? Niflaot, tamim, deim, and the wondrous works of him who is perfect of knowledge, in knowledge. Again, the interrogative hey here, followed by teda, the cow imperfect second masculine singular from yada, historically vada again. Do you know concerning the balancing of the clouds and the wondrous works of him who is perfect, of the perfect of knowledge? Again, we're seeing the rhetorical question, can Job understand the balancing of the clouds? Does he know how God causes the clouds to form, full of rain, and yet stand in the sky unsupported? Only God knows such working, is the implication that Job or that Elihu is making. So in verse 17, we then continue. Asher begadecha chamim, whose garments are warm, behashket eretz middarom, when the earth is stilled from or of the south wind. Hashket is the Hiphil infinitive construct from shakat. Notice the hey prefix with the pathak and followed by the I vowel, hashket, or the E vowel. The thought here, again, in verse 17, is Job, whose garments become warm when the south wind blows and the earth is still. Can you, with God, another rhetorical question, spread out the sky? Queries Elihu. Again, the expected answer is no. The sultry stillness produced by such a sirocco wind is clearly expressed as follows. And I'm giving a quote here from the author Thompson, entitled The Land and the Bible. There is no living thing abroad to make a noise when this happens. The birds hide in thickest shades. The fowls pant under the walls with open mouth and drooping wings. The flocks and herds take shelter in caves and under great rocks, and laborers retire from the fields and close the windows and doors of their houses. No one has energy enough to make a noise, and the very air is too weak and languid to stir the pendant leaves, even of the tall poplars. Such a south wind, with the heat of a cloud, does indeed bring down the noise and quiet the earth. And that's an interesting background statement made by this author, by Thompson. So now we come to verse 18. Targia imo lish hakim. Can you with him spread out or cause to spread out the skies? Targia from raga, to spread out, the Hifil imperfect second masculine singular from raga. Notice again the A-E vowel pattern, A-I vowel pattern, indicative of a Hifil imperfect. Can you with him spread out the skies? Chazakim kir'i mutsak, which is strong as a mirror that has been poured firm or molten, we could say, as a molten mirror. Mutsak is from sa'ak. It's a hofal participle masculine singular from sa'ak. And so the question that he's being asked in 18 is another one. In ancient times, mirrors were made of polished metal. The image is that of a beaten out metal mirror uh, from Turkiya, which is used to depict the bright sky in a cloudless day. Can Job spread this out with God? Asked Elihu. And so in verse 19, we then continue. Teach us, Hodieni ma nomar. Teach us what teach us what we shall say unto him. Hodieni from yada, cause us to know. It's a Hifil imperative masculine singular followed by the pronominal suffix first common plural. Cause us to know what we should say. Nomar, the cow imperfect first common plural from amar. What we should say unto him. Lo na'arok mipnei choshed. For we are not able to arrange or order our speech by reason of darkness or because of darkness. We cannot order it, seems to be, or arrange it. And na'arok is the cow imperfect first common plural from arak, to arrange. And so in verse 19, the text is saying, in light of these awesome acts of God, what can Job say to such a God? Because of man's ignorance in the presence of such a God, we cannot arrange our thoughts even and speech so as to contend with him, as Job has wanted to do. And so verse 20, the text continues then, Ha yesupar lo ki adaber. Shall it be told to him what I would speak or will speak? Another hey interrogative here. And then yes, sufar is a Puel, imperfect, third masculine singular from safar. So shall it be told to him that I would speak. Adaber is the PL imperfect, first common singular from dabar, to speak. Or should a man wish, im amar ish ki yevula. Or should a man say or wish that he were swallowed up. Yevula is a is a puel imperfect, third masculine singular from bala, to swallow up. And so in verse 20, how can a mortal man argue against an incomprehensible and infinite God? To do so is only asking to be swallowed up or destroyed. And so Elihu continues then in verse 21. Va'ata lo ra'u or. In other words, and now men do not see the light, and now they do not see light. Ra'u is the cow, a perfect third common plural from ra'ah. And now they do not see light. Ba'ir hu ba shechakim. As the wind, they do not see light, but the wind passes. The ruach, excuse me. They do not see light. Let me go back here. Which is bright. Ba'ir hu ba shechakim. Which is bright in the skies, or in the skies they do not see, because of their incomprehensibility of that. Beruach avara v'tetaharim. But the wind passes and cleanses them. Avra is the cow, a perfect third feminine singular from avar, going with ruach. The wind passes, and v'tetaharim, and it cleanses them. From tahar, to cleanse. Here we have a PL imperfect, third feminine singular, followed by the pronominal suffix, third masculine plural. And so the wind cleanses them. What he's saying here, it seems, when the wind drives the clouds and drives them away, and the sun shines through, man cannot look at it because of its brightness. Likewise, if God's hidden majesty and glory were suddenly unveiled, Job would be blinded by its brightness. This seems to be the thought here. And then in verse 22, Shaddai lo metzanuhu sagi choach. The Almighty, whom we cannot find him, is excellent of power. Metzauni is from matzah, and we cannot find him. We have the metzah, the cow perfect, first common plural from matzah, followed by hu, the pronominal suffix, third masculine singular. So as to the Almighty, we cannot find him. We cannot find out, I should say, find it. And he is excellent in power. Umishpat verov tzedakah lo ye'aneh. Yet, judgment and the multitude of justice or plenteous justice that he has, he does not humble. And here it probably means he does not do violence, or he does no violence, because he is plenteous in judgment and justice and power. And so the thought here is in verse 22. Verse 20, verse 23. While the Almighty, powerful God cannot be found out, he does not destroy or pervert justice or righteousness, as Job had previously implied in chapter 8, verse 3, and chapter 13, verse 18. So now we come to the last verse, verse 24. And Elihu concludes his speech in this verse by saying, Lachen yereuhu anashim. Therefore, men fear him. Notice yereuhu is the cow imperfect third common plural from yara, to fear, followed by the pronominal suffix third masculine singular in the hu. So therefore men do not fear him. Lo yereh kol hachmei lev. And he does not regard or fear all the wise ones of heart. So probably he does not regard or fear the wise ones of heart. Yereh is from ra'ah. He does not see, is the way I should render that. He does not see all the wise ones of heart. From ra'ah, cow imperfect, third masculine singular from ra'ah. And so, verse 24, in light of all that has been said, what Elihu is concluding is men should fear God, says Elihu, and realize that God does not regard any who are wise in heart. He does not see or regard that. Job had best desist then from his contending with God and reverently worship him as a righteous and just God, even though he does not nor ever will understand all of God's dealings. And that brings us to the conclusion of what we've been doing. This has been a wonderful experience for me to go through the book of Job, looking at the grammar and looking at a commentary, my commentary on it as well. I hope this helps someone. The book of Job is a fabulous book, and it is true, as we have come to an end of this great book, that has got to be one of the greatest poetic books ever written. And it's been talked about, as we said in the introduction, that it is so wonderful. The book of Job, George Footmore of Harvard said, is the greatest work of Hebrew literature that has come down to us in one of the great poetical works of the world's literature. This is a quote at the introduction, Roman numeral 13, in the Somsino book of the Bible on Job. Also, the book of Job, we could say, is like the Matterhorn of the Old Testament. And it's just wonderful. Again, I'm quoting on that same page, page Roman numeral 13 of some Sino books of the Bible on the book of Job. There is another quote. Tennyson and Carlyle spoke of it with bated breath. Great as the summer midnight, as the world with its seas and stars. There is nothing written, I think, in the Bible or out of it of equal merit. A noble book, and all men's book. It is our first oldest statement of the never ending problem, and that is man's destiny and God's ways with him on earth. So it's a wonderful, wonderful uh, book, and I hope that one would have the opportunity to go through it slowly. One can go through what we've done in one of two ways. If one has an interest in the Hebrew, they can go through and continue in their Hebrew grammar. That's what I've tried to do as I'm going through Job. Or secondly, just read the commentary. And if one does not know Hebrew, work in the English commentary part of the book of Job. And we've already finished the rest of Job, chapter 1, and we came to the end of including God's words to Job some time ago in chapter 42. So I would just encourage anyone to go back to our playlist and put the book in order, starting with chapter 1, and go through the playlist in that way. Again, thank you. This has been a journey, and I know I've enjoyed it. I hope someone else can find help in this great, wonderful masterpiece, the book of Job.